We are back on this special edition of the Spin Room, covering the dramatic developments regarding the legal woes of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I want to talk now about Case 2000, which centers on discussions between the Prime Minister and Arnon Moses, the publisher of the Yediot Achronot daily, allegedly involving favorable news coverage for the Prime Minister in exchange for government policies that were benefiting the paper. Mandelblit is also expected to announce plans to charge Moses in that case with bribery. Ellie, you know, this also shows, besides Case 4000, this immense importance that the Prime Minister gives to communications, to media, doesn't it?
It's not about Netanyahu. It's about the importance of the media establishment as a whole vis-a-vis politicians or politics. We must understand, it's as if CNN offered Trump this deal. It's like to take the biggest enemies and imagine them sitting behind the scenes colluding positive coverage. It smears not just Netanyahu or Arnon Moses or the people that are involved, but the way this relationship is being conducted. And this is perhaps the most alarming thing here for the public, of course, not for politicians and not for the media moguls. And I think that this point was somewhat pushed to the side because the story itself was so juicy and interesting. But the complexity and problematic nature of this relationship, this should have been the focus of this discussion.
Yossi?
I think a distinction should be made. You know, I think I'm for politicized media, politicized journalism. The problem is not that. You know, if it is ideologically politicized, why not? You know, we had a long tradition of newspapers that have,
basically,
of course, which is no problem. But now what we see here, this politicized media in a wrong way, where there is a narrow interest, the economic interest involved, where there is this a relationship of give and take between a political system and the media system, and this is on the face of it, and not only that, I mean, it's clear some kind of corruption goes on there, and at the expense of the wide public interest.
I'm finding it hard to understand why in this case there's no bribery charge. Would you understand that?
Neither myself.
Really?
Again, I don't know the details.
Of course.
But I think that this is a frightening case. I mean, you can understand somebody is greedy, somebody wants to have champagne or cigars.
We'll get to that case in a second. Go ahead.
But this case in which a paper is coming, an editor of the paper is coming to the Prime Minister and says to him, you know, I will make you a Prime Minister, but you have to do something with the paper which you don't own.
Right.
And the Prime Minister behaves as if he's the owner of the paper.
You're talking about Israel Hayom.
About Israel Hayom.
Yes.
Well, I'm writing, so I have to expose it. And says, okay, it's a deal. You know what? We will not publish on Fridays. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really, at the beginning, I could believe the first portfolio. I could 1,000. I couldn't believe that something like 2,000 may happen, and then there were the recordings. So it is there, and it is really. I don't agree with you that it is the systems or the organizations. It is the people. I mean, it is Netanyahu, and it is Moses, and it is the two discussions between, I mean, what was published is really unbelievable.
Every politician wants positive coverage. We have current members of Knesset who have certain deals with Yediot Achronot. It was already published. But what is interesting to me is that I think the main reason why the right wing wins in Israel is, well, two reasons. One, our enemies always want to murder us. And the second thing is that we have all these accusations from the left. So usually when people accuse Netanyahu, it gives him more votes. That's what happened in the last two elections. So I'm not sure how these two things fit.
There are some people who think, by the way, maybe Eli, you want to talk about this, that this whole announcement today, Netanyahu could actually turn this curse into a blessing.
He intends to do that, and he prepared himself, I'm sure, to make out of it the major issue of the next 5 weeks.
You're giving him a double-bladed sword. If he's doing this is bad, if he's doing that is bad, and then you're saying it's not political, or it's only political because of Netanyahu.
It is more than legitimate. If he makes out of it the major issue for the elections, it is more than legitimate if he wants so. I think that it is too big a risk for him. But he may do that.
You wanted to say something?
Speaking, there's one good thing for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, always has been and will continue to be like that. As long as the discourse is Netanyahu, let it be corrupt, yes or no, Prime Minister, yes or no, he wins the discussion. Because the distrust that the Israeli people might have in Netanyahu's potential innocence is irrelevant, because the mistrust in the, again, I'm saying it again, the so-called establishments, the judiciary,
so
the media.
He's okay? It's a win-win
listen,
situation?
personally, we need to make a differentiation between the personal situation and the political situation. Personally speaking, no legal expert, and I'm not trying to be challenging cases, but politically speaking, these elections, despite this very groundbreaking merger of the blue and white party, these elections are more than ever before a referendum on Benjamin Netanyahu, and in this respect, the people are with Netanyahu. Traditionally,
it's not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's about Benjamin Netanyahu.
Exactly.
I mean, the question here whether he's able to transform himself completely into a victim. You know, victimhood. He believes that victimhood might turn out to be an advantage if he is able to convince the people, at least to put it this way, metaphorically, his tribe. Yeah. Right. If he can sort of instill in there the belief that he's being persecuted, you know, personally, and then he would be one of us. So this is the whole, the campaign would be over that. He is one of us. He is being blamed. He's being persecuted, and he's being pursued, and therefore.
But the mere doubt in a kosher or non-kosher procedure is enough for him to tilt it in his favor, rightfully so or not. I'm not judging. I'm just.
Before we go for our break, I want to talk about the last case, Case 1000, where the Prime Minister is alleged to have accepted gifts from wealthy business figures like Arnon Milchan and James Packer in violation of the law. The charges will be fraud and a breach of trust. Also, not a bribery charge here. Is this maybe the least serious of all these cases?
It is the obvious one, in my view. I mean, again, I'm not privy to the details there and the proof, but it is the obvious one. I mean, to get in a systematic way, not a friend is coming, gives you a cigar.
Cigars and pink champagne we're talking about.
In tens of thousands of dollars, you know, and if you don't get it, so you call the donor and says, hey, what is going on with you? You didn't send me the last suit or the last suitcase or whatever. This seems like, you know, not a friend, a gift from a friend.
Right.
I want to add an anecdote. You know, I've been to the Chile, and we received some kind of pen, you know, like a very nice pen. We got back to the parliament, and the first thing that we've got to do is just to trust it in the hands of some kind of a committee, and they're going to decide whether we can hold on to these pens. And then at the end of the day, it turned out that the worth of it was about 100 shekel, and they said, okay, you can keep it. You know, so hey, you don't take gifts. That's it, you know. You don't take gift when you're prime minister, and you take gift with people who might, at the end of the day, ask you to do something for them. Even the appearance that it might be the case should prevent you from doing that. It's very clear.
We just have a minute left, Ron, because unrelated, but kind of related, shall I say. The Prime Minister was told this week to give back $300,000 to from associates. They got to help fund his legal fees. He even got a few suits from one of these associates. Why? This is one of Israel's wealthiest politicians.
Yeah, well, again, I think this is a double-bladed sword, and I'll say this. As an attorney, I would not sign something again before reading the contract, but I don't think it's so simple and so black and white, because if a politician invites me to their home and I bring them a bottle of wine that's worth 200 shekels, is that right? I don't think it's so simple to say you're not accepting gifts in general.
If you do it over and over?
For 10 years, after 10 years of him being the prime minister, and 250 million shekels being spent on trying to find out what is it that Netanyahu has done that's wrong, I don't know, we can argue if that's...
If it's
okay. You're talking about cigars and pink champagne, the money is...
20 seconds.
Even if you're right, and the question is not about, you know, yes or no, but the quantity, you know, like the magnitude, exactly, that he took. So there's no doubt that it is a violation, you know, of how to say it, etiquette, if not moral standard.
Well, I have to say that some people might say it looks a little bit petty in trying to take down Netanyahu in a way that's not democratic.
We have to go for another.
Good tries to get him down.
We have to go for another commercial break. I'll let you react when we come back. When we come back, more on the major developments regarding the impending indictments against the Israeli Prime Minister in these 3 different corruption cases. We'll be right back. Stick around. We We are back on this special edition of The Spin Room covering the dramatic developments regarding the legal woes of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And we're also now joined by Mohammed Al-Qasim, our senior Middle East Affairs correspondent. Thanks for joining us, Mohammed. But before we get to you, I want to talk some polls. There's a poll that was done by the Times of Israel yesterday. I'm going to show it on the screen about if elections for the Knesset were held today, who would they vote for, and also comparing what would happen if the Attorney General does indeed indict Netanyahu before the election, who they would vote for. That's what they ask. And you can see that the opposition parties, the blue and white party of Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, gets a major bump. Before, if it was a regular poll, they would lead 36-29 versus the Likud. After a decision by the Attorney General to be indicted, 44-29. Wow. Also, besides that, it looks like it's taking mandates from the right-wing bloc to the left-wing bloc. It could really be tipping the scales. Ron, this is something, a game changer.
Yeah, well, I think it really emphasized the fact...
have to be taken with a grain of salt as usual.
I'm just saying, this is the perfect example that, of course, there's a political effect to being indicted before the elections. This is the best proof. And the fact that you can see how it changes the polls, I think people should be a bit more cautious. But I want to say one more thing. We are a parliamentary system. I think that for these current elections, I don't think it's a question if Netanyahu is going to be the prime minister. The question is it going to be Netanyahu with Gantz or Netanyahu with Bennett. The right-wing chunk is always bigger. The left-wing chunk, for some reason, people add the Arab parties with it. The Arab parties have never sat in a coalition. And when people are saying they're going to sit with the coalition this time to take down Netanyahu, you have to understand that in the blue and white party, you have a few, you can call them tokens, but you have a few right-wing MKs, future MKs, that I don't really see how that's going to happen. And if that's the case, are you going to have Yair Lapid in the Haredi parties? Probably not.
Game changer when you see these polls?
I hope so. I hope that the numbers are right and that the center-left is bigger than the center-right or the right. I'm not sure whether this is already the case. It is very difficult to ask hypothetical questions, and even if it is not hypothetical, and this is asked today after the decision of a potential indictment, it is too early. I think that the big change would not be necessarily people moving from the right to the left or the center left, but people from the right who stay at home.
Right.
I mean, Likudniks who say we will never vote for another party, but we will not vote if our prime minister is a criminal. And this might be the big change.
They can vote for the new right.
Well, we don't have yet, like a deep analysis of the facts.
Right.
So I would say something hypothetically. Suppose it is the case that we see some kind of movement from the right center to the center left, I would dare say that it is to the credit of the Israeli public. That at the end of the day, if...
Or the Likud public.
Yes, the Likud public. If indeed the prime minister being indicted, and it is an issue for them to change the pattern of vote, well, kol hakavod, well, really, I mean, it is something to be said to their, in their favor.
Okay, I want to talk about some negative campaigning that we're seeing on the sidelines. A lot of other developments in these elections. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party was lambasted this week for claiming in a video that if rival Benny Gantz becomes premier, there will be hundreds killed, while using an image of a military graveyard as background. It wouldn't be the first time, of course, that campaigns go negative in Israeli elections. Our diplomatic correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, has a story.
Dead soldiers, fear-mongering, extortion. Is anything off limits in Israeli election campaigning? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was forced to apologize on Tuesday night after his Likud party released this campaign ad.
The Israeli public has understood what a leftist government means and refuses to be guinea pigs in an experiment that will cost hundreds of lives. So they are trying to conceal and fudge, but the public isn't stupid. Gantz is a left wing and left is dangerous.
The video's placement of graves of fallen IDF soldiers as a political attack riled election rivals and fallen soldiers groups. The fact that Netanyahu apologized shows there are indeed red lines. But what are they? Netanyahu turned the tide in the 2015 election by releasing this election day ad.
שלטון הימין בסכנה. המצביעים הערבים מגיעים בכמויות אדירות לקלפי. עמותות השמאל מביאות אותם באוטובוסים.
And again was forced to apologize. And Netanyahu continues to absorb blame for failing to rein in extremist incitement against Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in the run-up to Rabin's assassination prior to the 1996 election. And it was Netanyahu who coined the famous phrase, Peres will divide Jerusalem.
The government that is already negotiating about the future of Jerusalem, that is allowing Jerusalem, in fact, to be divided today, such a government will surely give up the remainder of the territories, will surely give up the Golan Heights.
All is fair in Israeli politics, it seems, as long as it comes with an apology. Mike Wagenheim, I24 News.
You know, the main question to me, Yossi, is did the Prime Minister know about this? Because he's known to be a control freak when it comes to media things. In past campaigns, he's admitted that everything really does go through him. This cemetery scandal, what do you think?
I wouldn't want to make allegations, unfounded allegations. I don't know. But there is an expression in Hebrew says the spirit of the commander. So if it is done within the spirit of the commander, it is bad enough. And let me also add another comment on that. We thought that we have reached rock bottom in terms of a smear campaign done against politicians and usually and mainly against people who are associated with the left in Israel. And it is indeed outrageous, not because, okay, who's going to win the election or not, because such smear campaigns at the end of the day really undermines the fabric of the Israeli society, the basic solidarity between us. To portray someone as a traitor or to portray someone as he is really careless about the destiny and future of our soldiers and that he is marketing with people's life, that would be really outrageous and ought to be condemned in all possible ways.
How did you feel when you saw that video?
Well, look, I'm not going to be the advocate for the Likud party, but I just want to say when I serve in the Army Reserves, I have people from the right wing, from the left wing. I really try to put the army aside and we all serve together. I don't think it's the rock bottom. The second I said I'm running, the Meretz party had a poster about me saying I'm demented and crazy. This is the crazy. So I don't think it's the worst thing that we will see, unfortunately. But I do hope to. We need to remember that at the end of the day, after this, we have to live together.
Yossi, you've probably seen a lot of negative campaigning in your very lengthy career here in politics.
Yeah. I saw many negative campaigns, and some of them were personally against me. I must say, with the graveyard, I agree totally with the answer of Professor Yossi Yonah. But I think that what he is doing with the Arabs is unforgivable. Unforgivable. Because it is repetitious. Before elections, he knows that the easiest thing is to incite against the minorities. If it is Jews in other places or Arabs here. Right. This is why he did it in 15, and now he is actually saying that a blocking bloc, not a coalition, God forbid, a blocking bloc with the Arabs is not kosher.
Muhammad, speaking of Arabs, how is the Arab press here in Israel, but also in the Middle East, watching this story, this indictment story?
Well, it's been followed closely, especially here in Israel, but also throughout the Arab world, saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu has always been corrupt, and he's someone who does business in a different way. And here in Israel, among the Arab minority in Israel, Arab Israelis, it's been followed very closely, and it goes to tell you how important and how strong and powerful and influential the Prime Minister is. And they're saying that this isn't new. However, the one thing that I noticed reading the Arab and throughout the Middle East as well as here in Israel, that the one thing is that nothing is going to stick on Prime Minister Netanyahu. That he's going to come out victorious, Teflon man, and he's gonna get over this one and continue to be the Prime Minister.
Mr. Udini, Ron, we were talking about how the diplomatic issues are not necessarily right now high on the agenda of this election. It's mostly about a referendum on Netanyahu. But we also heard U.S. Special Envoy Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, interviewed on Monday on Sky News in Arabic, saying that the quote American peace plan is very detailed and will focus on drawing the border and resolving the core issues. And your party responded to this. It seems like you're worried about it.
We are worried about it. Look, I have tremendous respect for Netanyahu. I think he's a great prime minister, and I think that he, unlike what some of the people just said here, I think that he was able to create ties with many, many countries. However, having all this pressure from Trump and building a coalition with the center-left, that's going to create, maybe, unfortunately for me, another Arab state, and I'm against it. And I think if the new right party with other right-wing parties will be a good, solid chunk of right.
I don't want to get into election propaganda because that's.
No, I'm just saying. So not propaganda. That's the agenda. I think that if Netanyahu will have a bigger right-wing chunk next to him, then it'll be a right-wing coalition. If he's going to have a small right-wing chunk, it's going to be a Netanyahu with a left-wing coalition. Right. By the way, that's what he's done in the previous elections.
Is there a lot of reaction to this Kushner interview, by the way?
Yes, not only the Kushner interview, but the leaks that have been coming out. In fact, today in the Al-Quds newspaper, the Palestinian newspaper, saying that this is going to be a focused on the economy and focused on making sure that the Arab Gulf states, the wealthy states, pay the money to invest not only within the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian territories in Gaza and in the West Bank, but also in Jordan, Lebanon, and elsewhere.
So no Palestinian state. I mean, this
no Palestinian state.
That is written in the
not even on the table, and no borders.
I'm sorry, you're not worried about the fact that Erdogan is not a big supporter of Israel. He knows about the plan. The Saudis know about the plan. The Americans know about the plan. The Arabs in Judea and Samaria and Gaza know about the plan. But the Israelis, I'm very upset about this. I think that we need to understand.
Not only that, bragging about our prime minister being such a brilliant guy and a leader in the world, and he is being avoided and being pushed to the corner like that.
He's not sharing this stuff.
Best friend.
Yeah.
Hold on. Are you going to?
20 seconds. Go ahead.
I don't think that he's being pushed to the corner. I think that the best strategy for the Americans are thinking about right now as business people that should keep it secret from the Palestinians and the Israelis to avoid any speculations and rumors.
We're going to have to. We're going to have to end it there, guys. I want to thank my guests, Mohammed Al-Qasim, Anbar Shafat, Yossi Yonah, and Yossi Yonah. Thank you very much for coming.